Hi everyone, I am very happy today to be talking about one of my favorite books, and that is the 2017 debut novel from Nicholas Eames, Kings of the Wyld. Now, everyone has been waiting for me to review this for a while because I am notorious for pushing it on people. I love this book and I want everyone I know to read it because I think it is very, very good. I read this book for the first time in the summer of 2020, and then I read it again in the fall of 2020. I imagine I will read it this year. I imagine I will read it again next year and every year after that because I love it. And I think it just gets more and more endearing the more times I read it and the longer I think about what it's about and what makes it really, really good. So, like I said, I have a reputation for loving this book. And I really think it is just a special book. Do you guys remember the Toby Keith song that says, "I'm not as good as I once was, but I'm as good once as I ever was"? To me, that song, like that message is kind of like the vibe of this book. And something I appreciate so much about the book is the fact that it follows heroes that are no longer in their prime. So often in fantasy, you are following teenagers that like kick ass and take names and just like totally take over the world because they're young and they have the world in front of them. And this is kind of, as someone who just turned 35 and is officially middle-aged, this definitely struck home to be like, you know what? Old people are cool too. Before I get into my review, I do want to read you guys the back of the book. The little blurb, I think it's really good. It says, Clay Cooper and his band were once the best of the best, the most feared and renowned crew of mercenaries this side of the Heartwild. Their glory days are long past. The mercs have grown apart and grown old, fat, drunk, or a combination of the three. Then an ex-bandmate turns up at Clay's door with a plea for help. The kind of mission that only the very brave or the very stupid would sign up for. And that's about it, guys. In the first couple chapters, you find out exactly what kind of story this is going to be. It's a mission, it's a quest, they have to rescue a girl, and he really just embraces every single fantasy trope you can think of, but puts such a unique spin, such a fresh twist on all of it, that it never at any time feels predictable or recycled or reused or anything like that. It feels super fresh and unique the whole time. So I will go ahead and go into my review format, but I'm going to be honest with you guys. I recorded this once before a few weeks ago and I felt like I nailed it and it was awesome. And then I reached up to like turn off my camera and realized that I wasn't recording at all. So I was pretty frustrated afterwards, tried again a few times, got mad. I let it all go, and now here I am back again. And I don't think it's gonna be as good, but in honesty, I just want to tell you guys what I like about this book, and I really hope that you will give it a shot if you haven't read it already. So as far as characters go, that is the heart of this book. That's what makes this book so good, in my opinion. The characters are just super memorable and lovable and believable, yet like totally out there and outrageous all at the same time. It's one of those examples where the side character is kind of the main character. You're getting the POV of somebody who isn't the main guy. And I think that offers really great perspective. This group has tons of personality, and I really was impressed at how well he developed the characters and you felt like you knew them with just one book. So often authors will spend a whole series really like teaching you who somebody is and like letting you pick up on the little tidbits that make somebody feel believable or unique. And somehow he manages to do the whole thing in just one book. So for me, the characters are the heart of this book and the biggest selling point. You guys know I'm a character-driven reader, and it didn't take long for me to just absolutely fall in love with this group of characters. As far as the plot goes, like I mentioned before, it's a rescue mission. It's a quest. But beyond the obvious, there's a goal. There's a city that is under siege. Somebody is trapped. They have to go rescue her. But beyond that, I was just really, really surprised at the emotional depth of this book. It was sold to me as something that was fast-paced, hilarious, great action, and just fun. Like, that's a word that will always come up when you hear about this book, is that it's fun, fun, fun. And it is. It's totally all of those things. But like I said, it has a surprising amount of emotional depth to it as well, to the point where, it definitely jerked some tears out of me a few times. I mentioned before that this is a getting the band back together group. So this is a group of mercenaries who were once on top of the world, the best of the best. And they were the heroes. They were the ones kicking ass and taking names, and they were renowned throughout the kingdoms. And now they're just, they're kind of has-beens. They are retired, they're old, they've grown apart in many ways. But because of this common goal they have, they got the band back together and they have a job to do. So that's the basic plot of it. Writing style and pacing. Guys, this is a very tight book. It is paced. It's excellent. It doesn't mean it's necessarily action-packed the whole time, but it doesn't take any breathers. You never have a slow part or something that you're like, okay, that's cool, but let's get back to the main plot line. The whole thing is immaculately paced and overall very impressive for a debut novel. As far as world building and magic, this book has tons of magic. Like, it is absolutely packed in there. This book was written, from what I understand, as kind of a love letter to fantasy, and it is also modeled after like a really elaborate D&D campaign. And so there's a lot of magic. There are a lot of fantasy races. There are a lot of fantasy, beasts and animals that you might see one or two sprinkled throughout other series. He puts them all in this story, and it makes it really, really fun. There's a wizard. So yeah, there's gonna be a lot of magic. Does it have a tight magic system, like a Brandon Sanderson magic system? No, not even a little bit. There's magic, and you just understand that it's magic because it's magic. So yeah, there's a wizard. He has a staff and a wand and a hat and a magic bag, and you're just along for the ride, and you understand that there's magic because it just exists. As far as the world building, there is some lore, and I would say in the first book it feels a little like it's just there to establish some of the world building. But I will say in the next book, which is Bloody Rose, the lore becomes a little more relevant, and what you learn in the first book becomes more important because of the second book. But again, it's nothing that like slows the pace down or feels like a history lesson. It's there because it contributes to the story, but it's also there to make the world feel absolutely unique. Does it doggo? It doesn't doggo. Unfortunately, there are no adorable, lovable animal companions in this book. But like I said, because of all of the fantasy creatures in it, you are going to come across some very interesting, if not lovable, animals. Battles and fights. So I think there is quite a bit of action in this book. There is one large-scale battle, and there are several brawls, like, maybe in a gladiator arena, fights in the woods, fights at a bar. It's very action-packed, but the fighting style, the way he writes the fighting, sometimes is extra realistic, sometimes it's in hindsight, and sometimes it's just kind of bizarre and off the wall because it's just kind of a bizarre and fun fantasy book. But there is lots of action. Like I said, I think it's written really well, and a couple of the choices he uses for how he tells about a battle or a fight is really unique and works really well, in my opinion. The audiobook is narrated by Jeff Harding. It's the only book I've listened to that's narrated by him. But I mean, 2 thumbs up. He did a really, really good job. At first, there was a couple voices he did that I wasn't quite sure about, but as soon as I got to know the characters and kind of like figured out why he was doing that, I loved the audiobook. His voices he did for some of the characters, for Moog in particular and Ganelon, I just loved. So definitely 2 thumbs up on the audiobook. It was very entertaining, very well done. And like I said, he did some pretty impressive and distinct voices that were really, really memorable. If this were to be rated like a movie, this book would definitely be rated R. Not only does it have violence and adult content, but it has lots of F words and cussing and stuff. So again, 2 thumbs up because I do love that in my books, but R rating, if you are concerned about those types of things, it does have language and violence. Do I recommend? Absolutely. I honestly believe that this book has mass appeal. I have recommended it to people who don't like to read fantasy, weren't asking for a fantasy recommendation, and they loved it. Because I really do feel like this is a book that I just can't imagine who wouldn't like it. It's digestible. In the end, the only thing I wished was that there was more. You might see here that I have 2 books. I referenced this one, Bloody Rose. Kings of the Wyld is a standalone, but it is set in a world that has other entries. So this is a standalone book, meaning if you read this book, you don't need to read the next one to have the full story. This is a standalone story, but it is written into a series that will have, I believe, 3 books total. So Bloody Rose is a sequel to Kings of the Wyld, but it's not necessarily book 2 in this story. They are their own stories, but Bloody Rose, I'm not necessarily doing a review for it, but I do recommend it. I read it shortly after I finished Kings of the Wyld the first time, and I loved it. I still think if I had to rank them, I'd put Kings of the Wyld above it because the characters that I came to love in Kings of the Wyld just outrank the characters in Bloody Rose by a little bit. But both books were really, really good, and both of them are easy thumbs ups. So a lot of people know that this book has a reputation for having a lot of music references in it. So Nicholas Eames is also a really big 70s rock and roll, dinosaur rock, classic rock, whatever you want to call it. He is a big fan of music. And something he did that was really creative was he wrote lots of references to 70s music into this story. Now, if that's something that you're really excited about, you're going to have so much fun with that. It's like finding little Easter eggs. If you're not a music fan or you're worried that that will be distracting, I don't think it's something you need to worry about because honestly, some of them are such deep references to music, like B-side titles of, a random Eric Clapton album or something like that. They're not going to be in your face or silly or distracting. Most of them are pretty subtle references. So if you're looking for it, it's pretty fun to find them. I found more the second time around than I did the first time around. But if that's something that sounds off-putting to you, I wouldn't let it distract you too much. I wouldn't let it get in your head because honestly, I don't think it's probably as prevalent as you think it might be. But if it's something that interests you, it is a really, really fun feature that makes it even more engaging, in my opinion. So, like I said, this book was sold to me as, oh my gosh, it's fun, it's fast-paced, it's hilarious, it is just a really, really good time. And all of those things are true, but I just don't want anyone to think that this book has no substance. Like I said, there's a lot of emotional depth. There are a few times I choked up or shed a tear because somehow he got me really, really caring about these characters, and what was important to them became important to me because of how well he wrote them. So there's not only amazing friendships written in this book, but there is a brother's relationship that comes up in this book that's one of the most special things I've ever read that I find to be just extremely heartwarming. And like I said, it kind of surprised me. I thought this book was going to be a fun romp, and it was good, but I came out in love. And it really is one of my favorite books. I kind of think of it like I'm constantly on a diet, so this analogy makes sense to me. But have you ever had a cheat meal that you're like, you know what? I'm just gonna go for it. and you eat the food and you totally enjoy it and it's indulgent and rich and it just totally hits the spot. But then you stop and you read the nutrition facts and you're like, this wasn't even a cheat meal. This is actually very nutritious. This fits my macros. This was good for me. And you're like, how did that even happen? How did I find something that felt indulgent and frivolous, but ended up being exactly what my body needed and was very nutritious? To me, this is the book version of that. I slipped it in like, you know what? I've been hearing about this book. I've heard it's fun. I need a break from serious books. This will just be like a silly little, little side book. And it just, it made me eat my words. It caught me off guard and surprised me in the best way, because I think it's just an excellent book that honestly is one of my favorites now, like favorite books ever. So absolutely 2 thumbs up. I recommend. Please let me know below. Have you read the book? What did you think? And if you haven't read the book, what else can I say to change your mind? So please read Kings of the Wyld and let me know what you thought. Thanks.